This event is sponsored by Miro. Miro is the online whiteboard platform where product teams can work together effectively. If you don't know where to start, it's packed with over 50 templates for product teams. Whether you need a Kanban, mind map, retrospective, product roadmap, or user story map, we've got you covered. Try it for free.
Hi, everyone. Very excited to be speaking today. My name is Antoni. I used to work at Grab as a product lead. And today I'm going to talk about why user immersion is crucial for any PMs. A little bit about me. So I've worked on different products from B2B to B2C to B2B2C. And I realized over my PM career so far that as a PM, I only have one job, basically, to help my team build something that is most valuable for the user, while at the same time making business, engineering, and design senses. So you might ask, like, but how, Antoni? How can you do that? I think I would like to emphasize that, as you all know, PMs, you are not the user. I should emphasize this again. You are not the user. And then, so how do we get the user insights, you might ask? And I would argue that there are actually 4 main ways to do that. And probably you can ask a simple question to yourself, like, first, do you know that the answer exists somewhere? Oh, sorry. Do you know what question to ask? And do you know whether the answer exists somewhere? If you do know both of them, then arguably you can just get the information very quickly through maybe doing some past analysis or research, or this is something that is maybe a common industry knowledge, or even if your product is more technical in nature, then you can even refer to some academic papers to get your answer. The next thing is, you know the question, but you don't even know what kind of answer might lie, and that's fine, and that's very common in product as well. And then you can argue that you can run experiments, be it a product or marketing experiments, like maybe if you change the landing page from A to B, will you get more different user behavior, or even maybe the way you engage a user from email or different channels, will they have like different reaction when you also change maybe the way you communicate things, or even do a more what we call exploratory research with the user research team as well, where you will ask like, tell me about a time when you did this, and more open-ended questions, or tell me about what you think about when you do this, what you feel about when you do this. And so it's very open-ended, and you will uncover more unknown things from there. And the next thing is a little bit more tricky, because maybe at some point of time you don't even know what question you might ask, but it is something that you know the answer to. And that's probably more of what I call the tacit knowledge or intuition, because especially as you become an expert in your own field, in your own product or your own user, you might just know certain things, like without even thinking that you know that information. And this can even happen on a community level, on your team, on the organization, or even societal culture, because everyone has been doing the same thing again and again, and nobody will question the status quo, if that makes sense. But for today, I think how user immersion fits in, which is today's topic, is I would argue that this is probably most useful. And you don't even know what question to ask, and you don't even know what kind of answer you might get. So this is a way to get that answered. So user immersion, in short, I think it's about embracing your user's reality. How do we embrace their day in a life? And yeah, I love this picture that I took on one of my trips back in Indonesia, because it just showed the reality, right? The diversity of and the messiness of things in the actual world. So this was one of the sellers that are sending stuff for one of my products, my delivery products that I work on. So the seller had to use a mobile phone to basically get the orders and then ship one of these sandals to their customers using the on-demand delivery product that we have. And I think what I love about this example is the fact that, I mean, we have like dashboards like Tableau, we have like user research going down like on a frequent basis, but I mean, unless I visited the store and talk to him and see the way the store is arranged, I will not realize what kind of situation he's facing, what kind of frustration he might face on a day-to-day basis, what kind of opportunities lies when we build new products or features for users like him. For example, things as might be as simple as, if someone orders a sandal from him, like how does he know where to find the right size sandal to pick, or what kind of like color is available, or since it's a sandal, how do you know that the pair matches with each other, right? Like the left and right is there. And this gives more insight about more things. Like, for example, if a delivery is delayed, is that due to the driver's issue, but is that due to a seller's issue? And specifically, is it because, this guy, for some reason, misplaced his sandal? And then it generates so many opportunities, like how might we then help him sort his items? How might we, ensure that the right item is not, the right item gets shipped to the right customer and stuff like that. And I think user immersion is going to answer that. And unlike the exploratory research that I mentioned earlier, I would argue that it is somewhat planned, because you have some hypothesis in mind that you want to test. User immersion is, I would say, you immerse, you just dive in and you just, embrace whatever it is. And this is another example where I try to understand how drivers park their bikes in Jakarta and how they tie the item. And as you can see, it's just a mess. Like, the bikes are not parked in the same order. They're not lining up. They're not aligned with each other. And they're probably, you can see that we are trying to stack the item on a bike, and it's actually touching another bike. And then you might ask, like, oh, will that damage the item? Will that damage the other bike? And stuff like that. And all this, again, I would argue that it's almost impossible to uncover through maybe like all the analysis that you will do with AI ML, or even like user research will tell you like maybe some snapshots of pictures, but it's just different when you actually see the drivers, like, try to unload the item themselves, like try to park themselves, and you imagine doing this under the heat of the sun, like under the dust that is flying around, and all the noise from the traffic. And I think it just built more stronger empathy when you do that. And why do we do user immersion? So I think I said earlier that you are not the user, but I will also add on that the user sometimes don't even know what they know or want, because I think humans are essentially just, habit creatures, right? So we do a lot of things out of habit. We don't even think about it. And I think another example that I have, like in Southeast Asia, like maybe in Indonesia specifically, again, because I spent a lot of time there, where people, for example, like spend a lot of time using WhatsApp to communicate, and it's just so deep in the culture that I think, for example, in some of my previous companies I worked for, we actually had a policy that you have to use Slack for work purposes. But because the people is just so used to using WhatsApp, you don't even get like a reply sometimes if you Slack them, and if you need certain response by a certain time, you have to actually switch to WhatsApp, and you just can't change that behavior very easily, and even if it's a company policy, for example, and I think user research is gonna go. You can ask a question like, why do you use WhatsApp, and you might get like 20 different answers, but I think by actually diving in and becoming like trying to embrace the life of your user, then I think you will just get that answer very instantly and just see that, okay, everyone use WhatsApp, all business use WhatsApp, full stop, right? Like, I think then you just get more insights about, without getting too confused with what kind of a analysis that needs to be done. Second reason is avoiding the lost in translation problem, because the more parties involved in the communication and the more complicated it is, the item that you want to communicate, things tend to evolve very quickly over time. And in our case, I think there's the steps between the users to the researcher to the product manager, right? By doing the user immersion itself, then you basically get even closer to the user, and you can derive your own like understanding or like empathy with the user, and that is really a strong complement to whatever your researcher or like analysis that is being done through other tools as well. And talking about analysis, then the third reason is also to avoid the analysis paralysis. In today's world, you have so many tools that you can use, and everything is can be overanalyzed. You have like AI ML tools, you have this dashboard, that dashboard, you have this kind of user research method, blah, blah, blah. But sometimes, I mean, you just go out and see what's happening, right? Like, I mean, if food delivery cancellation is going down, then maybe, yes, it's one way to do the analysis, but it's also another way to just go to the restaurant and see and observe what is happening there, and then that will help you get more insights more quickly and a quick and cheap and dirty way as well. And so, what mindset should we have to execute a successful user immersion activity, you might ask? And I think the first one is as simply as basically embracing diversity to the fullest extent, because I think everyone can be right, and your users will likely come from maybe even different countries and maybe even hundreds of countries, and as we all know, even people in the same country can behave very differently, and because we all have like different contexts, different backgrounds, different mental model, and like culture, the way we brought up is different, and everyone can be right. And I think as a PM doing user immersion, I think this is something that I think probably one of the most important thing to have. Like, I mean, you have certain ways on how you view the world, but the users is doing whatever they think is right for themselves, and I think we should just be comfortable with that situation as well. And then make it a habit, and especially people in bigger companies, they tend to have like a more formal process before you can do things like this. And I would argue that it's not actually useful if you are doing it as a once a year team building event where the CEO or the VP start to say that, okay, this is time to meet the customers, and you spend 2 hours in a day and talk to them, and then after that, life goes back to normal. And that is not the point. I think the point is, even if possible, I would argue that he should even do it on a day-to-day basis. Like every day, he should at least have a touch point with the user somehow, so that every decision that you make in that day is always user-oriented. It represents the real user need, and it empathizes with the condition that the user is facing as well. The third one is about being scrappy and being creative. I think there's some examples that I share with you. It's probably only applicable to whatever product I've worked on, and everyone has a very different product and different users as well in their situation. So like find the best way to be close to them. Be it, I don't know, if you're working for a sports product, maybe you should literally go to the gym more often to just observe how people actually train or exercise and so on. If you're working on maybe a music product, maybe you should start like joining, try to make your own music, or like try to learn an instrument and see that process and empathize with the user when they say that, oh, it's difficult to maybe play the piano because like of certain ways, and you know exactly what is difficult. Oh, the finger gets sore after you practice for a while, or oh, I just don't have time to practice. On this kind of issues or environment is all unique to your users and your product, I would say. And you should test out different ways to get close to that problem. And the next thing is, I think probably also the most important is about enjoying the process. And this is why I think having what I call the user passion fit is very important, because I think PM is, again, not a 9-to-5 job. It's about, it can be going on, and so I think it's very important for you to work in a product where you can resonate with the user problem. You can resonate with even the users as a person themselves, because if you don't care about the user problem, if you don't like talking to the users, and I feel like maybe you should try to change the product that you're working on, or even change a role, because then it's going to be a torture for you, and you might not be doing a good job, because then you might not be asking the right question. You might not go the extra mile to uncover the real unknowns in the user problem as well. So again, I think being passionate about the user is very important as a PM. But wait, I think so far, as you rightly pointed out, I've only painted the good pictures. And of course, with any arguments, there's also reasons to be skeptical. And I think one key skepticism point is about psychological bias. I think you might argue that, especially the way user research today is planned that way, is also, I think it boils down to answering at least two key points, right? One is to make it effective from a cost and time and effort standpoint. Another way, the reason research is done that way, is also to remove any biases. Actually, not just psychological bias, but even like in the research methodology bias, because maybe you might be having a sampling bias, for example. Then when you only talk to a certain users, that doesn't represent the whole universe of users that your product is serving. And to that, I think I would argue that user immersion is just a complement to existing tools. It's not a replacement. It's just like a sniper rifle. It's just like a scope on a sniper rifle, right, where you can use it to to better aim your target and shoot it. So it's about finding the right problem. So it makes it more accurate and make it more easier for you to find the problem. And at the same time, there's also times where you might overuse it. It might mislead you. For example, in the scope analogy, if you're trying to shoot something that's so close to you, then the scope itself might be misleading, because then you can't even see the objects that are close to you. And therefore, as a PM, it is important to know what kind of tool to use and when to use them. And I think user immersion is about complementing your current tools that your team is using. Again, I'm hearing this again and again, especially you PMs. We are all busy people. We have meetings with engineers, with designers, with marketing people, with our executives. We have to interview candidates. There's not enough time every day, and because you're a PM, I think you should always prioritize your time. And I would argue that probably talking to the user is probably one of the P0, like the priority 0, or the most important thing to do, because again, at the end of the day, you are building a product for your user, and if you don't know who your user are and how do they use your product and how do they live, then you might mislead your team by building something that the user doesn't need, which is probably one of the ultimate mistakes of becoming a PM. Lastly, COVID, and it just changed the world so much in the past few months, and I get it. It's tough for everyone. It's just changing the way we live, the way we work, the way our users use our product. Everything is turned upside down. And but at the same time, I think it's, again, be creative, because yes, COVID changes everything, but at the same time, the user still somehow operates their life, and maybe if they're a teacher now, they're moving to teach online, and you might need to find a way to understand how is that new reality going, and like what kind of new problems, what kind of new opportunities are coming up because of this new situation. For example, if you're in the medical field, maybe the doctors have to go to telemedicine and like consult patients remotely, and then you might need to find a ways to be close to that, maybe even try to consult doctors themselves. And if you're really good friends with some doctors, and you can even like ask if you can somehow shadow him or her remotely somehow, with still considering privacy issue, of course. And but I think the point is, I think be creative, and there's also ways to connect with the users, like online, maybe attending online webinars or conferences and so on. And so I think again, there are ways if you want to look for it. And so in summary, PM's job is about helping your team to build something that is most valuable for a user while making business, engineering, and design senses. And the user immersion helps to uncover this unknown unknowns in terms of finding what is most valuable for the user. And we discussed about 3 main reasons. PMs are not users. Users sometimes don't know what they know or what they want. Second reason is about avoiding the loss in translation, the user, researcher to product problem. And then the third reason is to avoid an analysis paralysis. And then we also talk about 4 different mindsets, at least, to how to make a successful user immersion. First, embrace diversity, make it a habit, be scrappy, be creative, and enjoy the process. User passion fit is therefore very important. We also discussed about at least 3 main reasons to be skeptical and how to, overcome that. Biases. It's about complementing the tool, not substituting the entire tool, or ways to get user insights. And the concern about time, again, I would argue that you should prioritize time talking to users. And lastly, about COVID, be creative, find ways to still engage with the user and empathize with their problem. So PMs, go out or use your Zoom and meet your users now, and therefore I think you can build more user-centric and better products that will create value for your users and makes hopefully business, engineering, and design sense. Yeah, and thank you again first to Product School for having me. I think this is such a great opportunity to connect with everyone. And of course, thank you to you for attending this webinar. And I hope you find it useful. And I'm always open to any feedback or any ideas that you have after attending this talk, and happy to follow up with you.